Okay, the only thing we do know is that there are sources that say that somebody who's a virulent anti-Semite, I knew, somebody who's a virulent anti-Semite is said to be a descendant of Amalek. But we don't know, and again, it's all speculation. At the end of the day, there's no nafkamina in halacha. At the end of the day, there are no halachic ramifications. It's all speculation, and since speculation gets you nowhere, let's go do something that will get us somewhere. I want to finish up Ba'alosa because there are a few parts. I don't know. We today, tomorrow, I think, still to finish Ba'alosa. Ba'alosa there's some very intriguing ideas in Ba'alosa. So first of all, if you take a look, we had said last time about the Levium going into the service in the Beis Hamikdash. Now, if you take a look in Perek Tes Pasuk Ches. Perek Tes Pasuk Ches. So you have over here. You go through. There's a really incredible idea here.
What page are you?
Page 778. 778. So they're the second year of the desert, and Hashem says to the Jewish people that He wants them to do the Korban Pesach. So they had done the first one in Egypt, and now they're going to bring the Paschal lamb, the Korban the Pesach sacrifice. And then the Torah says, 6 lines from the bottom, and 7 lines from the bottom, last word, on 778. Vayihi anoshim asher hayu tameim lenefesh adam. There were people who were tamei. They were ritually impure. V'lo yachlu lasos haPesach bayom hahu. They could not do the Pesach on that day. Vayikruvu lifnei Moshe lifnei Aaron bayom hahu. They came to Moshe and Aaron. Now these people are tamei. So why were they tamei? So the Medrash says that they were the ones who had helped with the burial of what do you call it? Of either, I think, Yosef's bones, or that they had helped with the burial of Nadav and Avihu. Vayomru ha'anoshim ha'hema elov anachnu tameim lenefesh adam. We are tamei. Lama nigora levilti hakriv es hakorban Hashem b'moado b'soch b'nei Yisrael. Why should we lose out and not be able to bring the korban? Why should we lose out just because we're tamei? Vayomer alei Moshe imdu v'eshva ma'itzav Hashem es elochem. Stay right here, and let me hear what Hashem says about this. Now, first of all, the question doesn't make sense. My son pointed out to me that their question doesn't make any sense over here. They say, why should we lose out? We're tamei. What do you mean, why should you lose out if you're tamei? Because the halach is, if you're tamei, you can't bring the korban pesach. And this is where Moshe then gets from Hashem. Hashem tells to Moshe, people who are tamei, the people who didn't manage to bring the first korban pesach, so then that's on Yud Daled Nisan. So on Yud Daled Iyar, they will bring the korban. They have the makeup Pesach, what we call Pesach Sheni. Pesach Sheni. They bring the korban Pesach Sheni with hold for a few minutes. But the question here is, what kind of question is that? They say to Moshe, why should we lose out? What do you mean, why should we lose out? Maybe we could close that door. If we close that door, we'll be able to keep the air in a little bit. Both doors should be closed. Thanks, Ezra. So the question, why should be tummy? The halacha is it should be tummy. What do you mean? It's like a guy saying to you, why should I lose out? I want to do Birkas Kohanim in the morning. Are you a Kohen? No. Are you a Levi? No. Are you Jewish? No. Oh, wait a minute, why should you lose out? Yeah, you're not qualified. Which I tell you, you're not qualified, you're not qualified. What do you mean, why should we lose out? That's a halacha. Why should we lose out? It's like a Kohen coming along and saying, why can't I be involved in burying bodies? Because you're a Kohen and you're not allowed to come into contact with bodies. Yeah, the same Torah says. Thank you very much. The same Torah says that when you're what do you call it? The same Torah says that when there's a korban pesach, if you're tamei, you can't be involved. So what were they really asking? So according to the Mefarshim, according to the Midrashim, they were involved in what's called a meis mitzvah. They were doing a mitzvah when they were burying these dead bodies, and therefore they said to Moshe, why should we? Thanks, Ron. Why should we lose out of doing mitzvahs? Because we were involved in one mitzvah, we should lose out on doing another mitzvah? It's one thing if you're negligent, if it's one thing you don't care about it or that sort of thing. But why should we lose out? And by the way, the commentaries point out when Moshe Rabbeinu says to him, Vayomer Amalei Moshe imdu ve'eshma ma'yitzav Hashem lachem. How does the article translate? Stand here. Stand and I will hear what Hashem has commanded you. What does it mean, stand here? So obviously that means just stay right here and let me hear what Hashem has to say. But there are commentaries that say what Moshe Rabbeinu was saying to him was maintain your level. In other words, they're indicating a level that we should all be. Sometimes a person comes like, oh, well, I missed Mincha today. I overslept, I missed Shachris today. And we kind of, we're flippant about it. We just kind of blow it off. Oh, big deal. All right, there's another Shachris coming tomorrow, right? When you're Jewish, when you're from, there's always another davening lurking, right? You missed one. All right, there's another one coming. There's another one around the corner. No, that's not the attitude. The attitude is I just lost out. I don't want to lose out. What can I do to do up? There are halachas about making up for davening. You miss Shachris, there's a way you can make a mincha, assuming you weren't a poshea, assuming you didn't do it intentionally. Guy overslept. It happened. You overslept. You miss Shachris. What do you do? Okay, there are halachas about how to make up Shemona Esrei mincha, but it should bother us. I lost out on a mitzvah. That's why the Gemara says a person should always run to do a mitzvah. Run to do a mitzvah, because sometimes in life you'll notice when you have a chance to do it. If you don't run, if you don't hurry up to do the mitzvah, mitzvahs have a way of getting away from you. Right? Run to do the mitzvah. Don't. But Rabbi Yisrael Salanter said, as I always quote, when you're running to do a mitzvah, just make sure you don't stampede the entire world on your way. Right? So run to do the mitzvah. Just remember that there may be people en route. Right? So just be careful. But at the end of the day, a person should care. Why should I lose out? Why? Lamanigas. Moshe Rabbeinu says, Imdu veshva. Maintain this. This is the level a Jew should be on. Jew should be on the level where you miss the mitzvah and you care about it. Not that you miss the mitzvah and you just, big deal, baby. Who cares? So that's the Imdu. Okay, but then we go back to the first question. The first question is, Lamani Gora. Why should we lose out? Okay, the answer is because you're halachically disqualified. But what they're really asking is, how could it be that we did one mitzvah and we lose out on another mitzvah? And by the way, you know that the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos says mitzvah goreres mitzvah. One mitzvah brings along another mitzvah. Sheschar mitzvah, and the reward for a mitzvah is a mitzvah. Now what that means is, and I'm going to tell you a concept from Reb Chaim Volozhiner which is mind-boggling, absolutely mind-boggling. Mitzvah goreres mitzvah means the nature, and you'll see this over and over. Imagine, you decide you're going to go to shul for Shachris. So you get into your car, you start driving, and then you see there's a guy who says, oh, by the way, can I have a ride? I'm going to shul also. Are you on the way? So now you get to do another mitzvah. You get a chesed of bringing this guy to shul. And then when you get to shul, not only you put on your tefillin, some guy comes in collecting tzedakah, so you get to give him tzedakah. And then some guy asks if he could borrow your pen to write out a check, so you lend him your pen. And then somebody else asks, oh, by the way, I need a pen too. So your pen makes it ways right around the room. So just by going to Shachris, just by going to davening, one mitzvah of going to shul brings along the mitzvah of doing a chesed and davening and answering a maniation rabbi and lending out your pen and giving tzedakah. One mitzvah leads to another mitzvah. That's the nature of it. Goreres means mitzvah, goreres mitzvah. It drags another mitzvah in its wake. Number one. Number two, schar mitzvah, the reward for a mitzvah is a mitzvah. Hashem, the plain meaning of this, of schar mitzvah, is that you're rewarded for doing one mitzvah, you're rewarded with the opportunity to do another mitzvah. Okay. Reb Chaim Volozhiner says, when you stop and think about this, you actually get dizzy from this. What do we know about God? Only what He's told us. And even Moshe Rabbeinu, it says, Lo Yirani Ha'adam V'chai, nobody could see me and live. Nobody could understand, get a full conception of what God is. The only thing we do know is what He's told us. And what He's told us about Himself, which we obviously have through the tradition, is that He is a Tov Umetiv. Tov Umetiv means He's good, He's the essence of good, and He bestows good. He's a Tov Umetiv. Now, that means, and we're talking about God, so any human emotion or any characteristics are only because that's the only we can relate to. God is constant and unchanging. But what He's told us about Himself is that He's Tov Umetiv, and that He, quote unquote, wants the opportunity to bestow good on us. Now, if you do a mitzvah, God rewards you, right? You get for every mitzvah, you get rewarded. Well, as soon as God rewards you, that itself is a mitzvah. Allowing God to reward us is a mitzvah. Why? Because He's a Tov Umetiv. So schar mitzvah, the reward that we get for a mitzvah, is itself a mitzvah. Not just schar mitzvah, that the reward for doing a mitzvah is a mitzvah. The reward that we get for a mitzvah, getting reward is a mitzvah. Can you imagine? Could you imagine? It's like somebody wants to give you a gift. Somebody really wants you to give you a gift. And they do you do the, you don't, I don't know, but you allow them to give you a gift. Right? You allow them to give you a gift. That's a mitzvah. You know what an example would be? You've seen this. A couple, the Cohens invite the Levins for Shabbos a meal. And Mrs. Levin says to Mrs. Cohen, can I bring something? No. Oh, let me bring something. Right? They actually get into a fist fight over it. Right? Letting her bring something is actually the mitzvah here, because that she'll feel better that she could also bring something. She'll be more comfortable. She'll make the liver. Right? So she'll deliver the liver. Right? And that way you let her. So by you receiving it, you're actually doing a mitzvah. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us the reward, that's a mitzvah. Well, we've done the mitzvah of allowing ourselves to be rewarded. Well, that itself is a mitzvah. So what do we get for that? We get reward. But because we get reward, that's a mitzvah. Which essentially what's Rav Chaim Volozhin telling us?
It's a cycle.
It's endless. A perpetual, eternal, endless cycle for every mitzvah that you do. For every single mitzvah that you do, there's an eternal reward that's absolutely endless. Because char mitzvah. So what they're saying to Moshe Rabbeinu is, 1 second, we have a rule over here. How could this possibly be? How could it possibly be that we did a mitzvah and then we end up losing out? And therefore Moshe Rabbeinu says, you're right. Let me see what Hashem has to say about it. And at that point, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives the command. That's what Torah goes on and gives the command of the Korban Pesach, the Pesach Sheni. Okay, now go to page 780. This is also an insight, a remarkable insight into human nature. It's not to play me. Ezra, what were you going to ask before? Sorry.
No, it's now irrelevant. Because, I was just going to say it's kind of like you're disagreeing with Emes. It's like
who's disagreeing with
why
that?
Why does Hashem command us like this?
Right. So that can't be what they were saying. Right. We have to start. They obviously can't be that that's what they were saying. So that we have to figure out what they were saying, which is how could we lose out if we've been doing it? Can we make it a little colder in here, gentlemen? I was on a bus. I got on a bus on Friday to go. Friday was about 32. Shabbos was 35. I got on a bus on Friday. The air conditioner wasn't working. The heat was on. And the driver was playing with the thing, trying to get the air conditioner working, but experimenting at our expense. I rode it for one stop and I got off the bus. I wasn't going to stay on there. I figured by the time I get home I'd pass out, or I'd turn into a piece of, I'd be like a cholled potato. I just wasn't interested on Erev Shabbos. Okay, on page 780, right in the middle of the page. So it says like this: Uvayom hakim es hamishkan. There's a very subtle idea here, but I want you to see this. I want you to see this because this is also a very interesting insight into human nature. There's Uvayom hakim es hamishkan. On the day that the Mishkan was put up, kisa he'onon es hamishkan. The cloud of glory covered the Mishkan. Le'ol ha'edus. Uva'erev. Everybody see that right in the middle of the page. Uva'erev. Yeh al hamishkan kemare eish ad boker. In the evening, at night, there would be on the Mishkan what appeared to be like a fire till morning. Kain yeh tamid. That's how it always was. He'anan yichasenu. The cloud would cover it. Umare eish leila, and the appearance of fire at night. So, first of all, you stop and put this into perspective. This is 40 years in the desert. 40 years in the desert that during the day, there's a cloud over the Mishkan, and at night, there's a fire over it. That means you're seeing a blatant miracle every single day. Every single day of your life, you're seeing a cloud over the Mishkan during the day, even if it's a nice, clear blue day, blue sky outside, right? You're living in San Diego, where the weather never changes. And you ever been in San Diego? The weather's about 73 degrees all year round with blue skies. The weather report is very short in San Diego. They just say same as yesterday, right? Same as all year. Right, and it's very, very consistent. That's how it was in the desert, except over the Mishkan. Over the Mishkan, there's a cloud, and at night there's a flame over the Mishkan. Right, pretty neat, right? You have what do you call it? They probably had marshmallow roasts or whatever it was every night. A marshmallow roast with the flame over the Mishkan. Not really. So here you have the Torah tells you, and you're seeing this every day. This is accompanied by manna falling every single day, and a well of Miriam that's providing you with water. It's a pretty interesting way of living. Right, we got 40 years in the desert. Okay, number one. Number two, Elie Wiesel. You've heard of Elie Wiesel, right? What was the first book he wrote was called Night. There's a rule in life that night always represents ordeals, troubles, difficulties, Yaakov Avinu wrestles with the angel through the night. It's at the crack of dawn at daybreak, that the angel says, okay, I got to go. Because the night wrestling with the angel, when Yaakov wrestles, the Torah refers to it as a man, but the Medrash says that it's the archangel it's the ministering angel of Esav. And Esav represents the anti-Semites. That angel represents the anti-Semites through history that are going to torment the Jewish people through the night of exile. Night always represents when things are challenging, when there are ordeals, when things aren't going well. Daytime is always when things are light. It's light, the sun is up, and everybody's in a much better mood. A life rule that I will give you, when you get married, and I've mentioned this in the past many times, a life rule when you get married, somebody well-meaning advice that you're going to get, which is very poor advice, by the way, but it's well-meaning. Somebody is going to tell you that when you and your spouse have a fight, you should never go to sleep upset with each other, you should work it out. That's very poor advice. It's well-meaning advice, but it's not realistic. The best thing you could do when you're upset with each other is to go to sleep. Just agree, listen, we're upset, let's go to sleep. Wake up in the morning, and within 10 minutes you work it out, which means you apologize, by the way. The man has to apologize, but within 10 minutes you work it out. Because at night you're tired, you're cranky, you're frustrated, everything looks bleak. You got a good night's sleep, your head is clear, the sun is shining, it doesn't look so bad. You work it out. Nighttime is always when Jews are going through ordeal, when symbolically is what is gullus in ordeals. If you pay attention carefully at the wording of the pasuk, when was the cloud on the Mishkan? The cloud was on the Mishkan when? During the day. Every Jew, we say, Ve'asuli Mishkan v'shachanti b'socham. When the command of the Mishkan was given, it says, Ve'asuli Mishkan, they should make a Mishkan and I will dwell among them. That means each one of us is making a Mishkan of ourselves. When it's daytime, when things are going well for us, then we're more or less in a cloud. That doesn't mean that we're terrible. It just means that we're, we could get sidetracked from what's important because of the various successes of life. Things are going well, we're in a better mood, and we may lose our focus a little bit, like being in a cloud. At night, there's a pillar of fire. At night is when the devotion of the Jew really shines through. If you take a look and you want to read, there are a lot of Holocaust books that have been written. Lots of Holocaust books. Now, a lot of them are excellent books. A lot of thick Holocaust books, excellent books analyzing why there's anti-Semitism. They're excellent, excellent books. If you have any wobbly tables in your house that need something to hold them up, that's what those books are good for. You put them underneath, and they'll hold up your table very well. You could also use them to start off your Lag BaOmer fire. There are other Holocaust books which you should read, which are books that talk about the devotion of Jews while under the circumstances of being in the Holocaust. What Jews did in spite of the difficulties they were going through in order to remain loyal to Torah and to Halacha. Those are books that you should read. That means that when the Jews, there were a lot of Jews, and even assimilated Jews, by the way, assimilated Jews who in the concentration camps became more devoted to Torah and said, hey, listen, if I'm going to be persecuted for being a Jew, I'm going to do this right. I'm not going to die. I'm not going to die as a Jew. I'm not going to die for being a Jew without being Jewish. And it brings out often being under the gun. That's why one of the ironies of life, in Russia during communist rule. So, they started a movement in Russia of tshuva in the 70s. They started a clandestine tshuva movement in Russia, right under the noses of the communists. There were rabbis who actually went to Russia, incognito, rabbis who shaved their beards, put on baseball caps, and they would meet with these Russian refuseniks, and they would teach them Torah. Some of these rabbis who taught Torah 18 hours a day. And they had a pyramid system there in Russia where one guy would learn something. Whatever you learned, you taught to two people, then they would learn. And it was all done it was all arranged in advance, and they would smuggle in tefillin and svarim and all sorts of things that they did with these Russians. Now, I want to ask you a question. Imagine a group of, 10 or 11 or 12 Russians in a cellar who are davening against the communist law. And you could end up going to Siberia or worse if you're caught, right? How much talking do you think there would be during davening or during laning in that cellar, right, in Russia, in a Russian cellar under communist rule? Yeah, schmoozing during davening about either sports or the stock market or something else. I don't think, I'll go to Siberia for davening. I'm not going to Siberia for the stock market. I'm not going to put that on the line. And ironically, sometimes when you're under the gun, it brings out a different level of devotion. When it's rolled out for you on the table, when it's easy, all right, you kind of you become complacent about it. This is a little bit of the cloud. During the day, there's a cloud. At night, you're telling us not to do it. We'll show you, right? And these are people who are able to learn under the most extenuating circumstances. They push themselves. I will tell you, Shaila, there's a rabbi went to Russia, and a 17-year-old Russian Baal Tshuva came to him. He said, "I have a question, a halachic question." So, what's your question? He said, "When I study Torah, I'm able to study for 6 hours at a stretch, and after 6 hours, my mind starts to wander." I have this problem all the time, by the way. After 6 hours, my mind starts to wander. So he says, what's your question? He says, well, I know how to stand on my head. And what I do is I stand on my head for 10 minutes. The blood goes to my head. It clears out my head. I get myself upright. Then I'm able to study for another 3 or 4 hours. He says, yeah, what's your question? He says, I want to know, while I'm standing on my head, can I recite Mishnayos by heart? I've never been asked that question, by the way. I've never been asked that question. Nobody's ever asked me that question. I've never asked that question. I've been asked about guys forgetting Yala v'Yavo on Rosh Chodesh, their third time through Shemona Esrei. That I've been asked about. I've been asked other questions. I've never been asked about reciting Mishnayos by heart while standing on your head. Why is it a 17-year-old Russian under command? Because that's when you play for keeps. And that's what the Torah is telling you, first of all. That at night, when things are challenging, that's when the fire of the Jew's devotion. There's stories from the Holocaust. There's a book in the library here, if anybody wants to take it. If I find it, I don't know if they still, where you can find it. There is a book that was translated from the Hebrew. There was a rabbi named Rabbi Ephraim Oshri. And Rabbi Ephraim Oshri was the Rav of the Kovna ghetto. And during the war, the Germans took him, they took a barn. There was a big barn in Kovno. They gathered all of the Jewish artifacts in the town, the Svarim, the mezuzahs, everything Jewish. They put it in this barn. And eventually this was going to go into the Museum of the Extinct Jewish Species, which the Germans were planning after the war. There was going to be a museum of the extinct Jewish species. So they had this barn, and they made this Rabbi Oshri, who was the Rav of the town, they made him the guard over the barn. He was the shomer over the barn. And the irony was, because he was getting questions, he had access to more Sfarim now to answer questions during the war. So he was getting questions, various questions that he was getting. And then what he did was he wrote the answers down in, what do they call the thing that bullets are? The bullet cases. Empty bullet cases. He wrote down the answer, put them in empty bullet cases, and he buried them in various places. And he figured after the war, if he survives the war, he's going to dig it up and he'll print a sefer. And he did. He wrote a several-volume set called Shailas Uchuvos Min HaMa'amakim, which are the responsa from the depths. Right? And in the library, it's translated as the responsa from the Holocaust. There's a book called Responsa, but you can't read this on Shabbos, by the way, because it's sad. But I would recommend reading it on Tisha B'Av, because these are shailas that Jews asked during the war. For example, a Jew who was smuggling in flour before Pesach. He managed to smuggle in flour into the ghetto, and 3 days before Pesach, the guards caught him, the Nazi guards caught him, and they beat him, and they knocked out his teeth. So he wanted to know, because he came from a Hasidic background, and the only way he'd be able to eat matzah is by immersing the matzah in water to soften it, but he came from a Hasidic background where they don't eat gebruks. On Pesach, they wanted to know if is he allowed to eat gebruks under the circumstances. What the answers are almost irrelevant, because the answers are whatever the halachic answers were. But the questions that people were asking is the shocker. Those are the shockers. Or a Jew who had they asked Jews who had to clean latrines with their hands all day, so their hands were soiled all day long. How are they supposed to daven? When could they daven? How could they daven? What could they daven? These sorts of shilas. These are the questions that he was asked. So he wrote this sefer. I recommend reading it, because then you see people say, the Holocaust stories, this Holocaust stories. Read what Jews were willing to do during the Holocaust. They see what devotion is. That's what the book called again? It's called Responsa from the Holocaust, Rabbi Ephraim Oshri. It's translated in English. In Hebrew, it's called Shailas Uchuvas Min HaMa'amakim. I don't know if it's available in the stores. I don't know if it's still in print. I don't know but I've written down some of the shailas. It's really something. They're just stunning. Just Just remarkable stuff. Remarkable stuff. Heartbreaking stuff, but remarkable what kind of devotion people have. Just remarkable stuff. I think there was one of them where a guy had a cross tattooed on his muscle. He had a cross that was tattooed. They tattooed a cross on his muscle. Then he had a side shot. How does he put on tefillin? Because he puts on tefillin, he's got to reveal a cross. Now, these sort of shilas that people had. Just unbelievable stuff. Unbelievable stuff. So that's what it means, number one, that there's going to be a fire at night. That when it's nighttime and there's challenge, that's when the people really shine through, number one. Number two, there's another insight in the human nature. One of the commentators, one of the fortune points out, it's very subtle, very, very subtle, very, very subtle. But it's really, and again, sometimes Meforshim, they see things in the Chumash, which even if it isn't literal in the Chumash itself, but it's an indication of human nature. So if you take a look again carefully at Pasuk Tes Vav, it says, "V'yom hakim es hamishkan kisa ha'anan es hamishkan le'ol ha'edus." Now pay attention carefully. Uve'erev yel hamishkan kimari eish ad boker. And look at the next pasuk. Kein yeh tamid ha'anan yichasenu umare eish laila. Do you see a difference between the two psukim? A one-letter difference. In pasuk Tes Vav, it says at night it will be kimare eish ad boker. And in pasuk Yud Zayin, the next pasuk, it says umare eish ad boker. And it was the appearance of fire till morning. What's the difference between the two? One says kimare eish, and one says umare eish. What's the difference between the two? Kimare eish and umare eish.
Well, one is saying that there was literally a fire, and one is saying that there's something that is like a fire.
Excellent. That's how it translates. Which one came first? Kimare eish. It was like a fire. And then the next pasuk says it was a fire. Which one is a higher level of amazement?
Like a fire?
Yes. If you see that, wow, it's like a fire. And by the next day, it's a fire. I mean, you get used to anything. You get used to it, you take anything for granted. Right? The first time you say, wow, it's like a fire. Right? Obviously, that didn't happen to them. But this is what the Torah is showing you what could happen to a person. You can look at it one day and say, wow, it's like a fire. Then you look at the next day and say, it's a fire. Yeah, and can you explain to me why this fire happens to come every night over your Mishkan and nothing else that you forgot about already? We're capable of taking anything for granted. That's what the Torah is teaching you. And that a person has to maintain that enthusiasm. That goes back to what we said at the beginning of the Parsha. By Aaron HaKohen, we said, Melami lahagid shivcho sh'Aaron shaloshina, that Aaron never veered off of that original enthusiasm that he had. That original enthusiasm of lighting the menorah never changed. And the person could easily lose it. That's one of the challenges in Judaism, is to maintain that excitement and that motivation. That's a challenge, to maintain that motivation. Yeah?
Bro, where does it say that it is a fire?
The first pasuk says, Kim mare eish ad boker, right? Pasuk Tes Vav, first word on the line. Pasuk Tes Zayin. Right at the end of the pasuk, it says, Kim mare eish ad boker. You see where that is?
Yes.
And the next the line right under it, it says, umare eish. Okay? That's the difference. Okay. So that's as far as the fire goes. Now we go to another bizarre occurrence. By the way, when I was about 19, my father, Olav Shalom, took me to a parking lot to teach me how to drive a stick shift. We had a Pinto. It was a Ford Pinto. It was a little car. It was about the size of this table. It was a great car. You could park it in an envelope. It was a wonderful car. Problem was that once in a while, these cars got hit in the back and they blew up. So there had been a recall, but all the Jews had them because they were cheap. Great car. So he took me out to a parking lot to learn how to drive a stick shift. And for about 20 minutes, every time I tried shifting, the car died. I could not coordinate, what's it called? You got to release the clutch and then put the thing. And I just couldn't do it. After 20 minutes, I said, Dad, forget it, I'll drive the automatic. So he said to me, come on. Millions of people drive stick shifts. You can learn how to do it. So we tried for another 10 or 15 minutes, still couldn't do it. So I was sitting there, I was really frustrated. I was upset with myself. I felt I should be able to do it. I'm sitting there, and I'm getting really frustrated. My father was a very wise man. And he let me stew for a second. I said for about a minute, he didn't say anything. I'm just sitting there like this. And he goes to me, Mom knows how to drive it, right? That was it. within a minute, I was the best stick shift driver in the city. Wheelies, spins, anything you want. I could do it all, right? There was simply no way. There was simply no way that mom was going to drive a car that I could drive. That just was not going to happen. So if you're motivated enough, you can maintain that's a trick in Yiddishkeit. You maintain the motivation. Right? Stick with the motivation. You guys ever see? You ever see they have these chair in school? When you were in school, they had these desks with a chair-desk combination. The chairs attached to the table. Okay. When I was a sophomore in high school, two guys made a wager in the middle of geometry class. Two guys made a bet. The bet was one of the guys said he could hurl a desk out the second-story window in the middle of geometry class without the teacher noticing. Right, I was in the room. He won the bet. I saw he won the bet. He was the principal's son too. He won the bet. Yeah, today's a rabbi, of course. He won. He won. All the gangsters became rabbis. He won the bet. Two guys staged the fight. The teacher was a yuckle anyway. He went to break up the fight. In the meantime, this guy just took it up. He looked out. And looked out the window. Out it went. A desk went flying out the window from the second story. If you're motivated enough, you can do basically anything. You can do anything. No, there was nobody in the desk at the time, but that wasn't beyond us either. We had a guy who made money who actually was sponsored to jump out that same second story window. Right? He hung, he dangled, and then he jumped out from the side. That I saw also. He jumped out the second story window, and he ended up on the grassy knoll over there, and he was fine. I got paid. I got sponsored to eat a dandelion. Right? That wasn't quite the same danger as jumping out a window that I did, or throwing out a desk that I did. So if you're motivated enough, with enough motivation, you can do anything. That's the trick. That's what the Torah wants. Okay. The Torah then goes into another very, very peculiar idea here, and it talks about the Jewish people traveling. Now pick it up on Pasuk 17, which is about 10 lines from the bottom. It says, "Ulefihe olos ha'onan me'al ha'oel," when the cloud would lift off of the tent, "V'acharechein yisu b'nei Yisrael," then the b'nei Yisrael would travel. "Uve'makom asher yishkan sham me'onan sham yachanu b'nei Yisrael." Where it would stop, that's where the Bnei Yisrael would camp. Al pi Hashem, Yisu Bnei Yisrael, Al pi Hashem. By the word of Hashem, they travel, or the word of Hashem, they camped. Kol yemei asher yishkan al mishkan nachanu. And the Torah starts describing how this pattern went. Let's read another couple of psukim. Uveharich al mishkan yamim rabim, if the cloud was on the Mishkan for many days. V'shamru Bnei Yisrael v'shiras Hashem v'lo Yisrael. That's where they would stay, they wouldn't travel. 4 lines from the bottom. Sometimes only a few days. And again, by the word of Hashem, they can't. By the word of Hashem, they went. Sometimes a couple of days. Sometimes it would be there months. Sometimes a year. And then once again, Al pi Hashem yachanu, al pi Hashem yiso, es mishmeres Hashem shamar, al pi Hashem yad Moshe. Okay, so it talks about the traveling of the Bnei Israel. They're in the desert. I don't know if you guys ever traveled. You probably have traveled. You've never traveled with children, right? The last time I traveled with children was about 30 years ago, right? No, 27 years ago. And then as soon as I finished traveling with children, I said to my wife, never again. And we had to go see her parents, traveled with 5 children between the ages of 6 months and 8 years old. Right? And that was great fun. Not. And you get on the plane and I'm walking around with the baby, up and back with the baby, and then you're in the airports. We get to Belgium. One of our stops was in Belgium, and as we get there, there's an advertisement. We see an advertisement. Well, make sure you know where your kids are. There's been a spate of kidnappings. Just what we need. And the kids, and then when you get to where you're going, the kids are jet lagged. When you get back home, the kids are jet lagged. Well, that was the worst. We got back we were 3 weeks to see our parents, came back and it's a connecting flight. It was unbelievable difficulty. Come back home, and then the kids are jet lagged. And it got to a point where the first night, the kids went to sleep at 11 o'clock. And we looked at it, we thought, oh, this is great, no jet lag. Then they all got up at 1 o'clock in the morning. The whole gang, a whole bunch of them, they were jet lagged. So for about 2 weeks, they were getting up in the middle of the night. I got to a point, I had to rock the baby, the 6-month-old was in a crib. I got to the point I was so worn out, I was sitting on the floor rocking the baby because the baby was crying, and I was crying. I was literally just, you're crazy from lack of sleep. It was torture. And so traveling, you got to pack up the family and travel and go. They pack up the people. Why'd they pack up their families and go? Remember, they're having 6 at a time over here. Right? So you got a small family of 18, right? Then you got the larger family of about 42. Then you got the Schwartzes down the block, with 96. You got some serious packing to do. And why are you moving? And where are you moving to? Well, we're in the desert. We're in a wilderness. Where are we going? To another spot in the wilderness. What was wrong with that spot? What are we moving for? Can you imagine? You pick up your tent, and then you're there, and you haven't even got the peace of mind of going, all right, we're home. Because every day, as soon as that cloud starts, a little bit of a wind, and you look in the cloud, maybe a little bit of cloud. Are we? We are going. We're not going. We are going. Oh, it's moving. Let's go. Why? We just got here 3 weeks ago, a month ago. Sometimes it was a day. What's going on? Number one. Number two, the Torah repeats quite a few times, Al pi Hashem yachanu v'al pi Hashem yiso. By the word of Hashem they camped, and by the word of Hashem they traveled. So the first lesson here is there was really no pattern. There are commentaries that say that they moved from a given spot if somebody did something wrong. There is an opinion like that when somebody did something wrong, if they didn't behave properly, then the cloud moved. But essentially there was no rhyme and reason here. And that's the first thing that we're being taught is the person has to live with bitachon. A person goes through various stages of life. We don't know why HaKadosh Baruch Hu is doing this and why the purpose is. We only know that we have to trust Hashem knows what he's doing. And a person goes through various stages in life. And I don't know why this happened, and I don't know why I just missed the bus this morning, and I don't know why that bus didn't have the air conditioner on, and I don't know why my electric bill is bigger than it should be, and I don't know why this and that and the other. It's all being determined. Unless I do something foolish, the Gemara says a person does not stub his toe down here unless it's been decreed up there. It's all based on Hashem's decree, unless we do something foolish, unless a person is reckless. So if a person gets, the Gemara gives the example, the Gemara says, Tzinin pachin. A person gets sick. Let's say a person person has wet hair, takes a shower, and runs out in freezing January weather with wet hair, and then ends up with pneumonia. And they say, oh, it must be bashert. Don't blame Hashem for your foolishness. So you're being reckless, don't blame Hashem. But if you've done everything you could possibly do, you put on your ways, or what's it called, the ways, right? You put on your ways, and you start driving, and it says that it's going to take you 20 minutes, and as you go driving down that route, a truck jackknifes across the street and blocks you off for 3 hours. I did what I could. What do you want from me? HaKadosh Baruch Hu brought it. Why did it happen? I don't know. Hashem made a plan. I was coming back from last week when I went to be Menachem Oval. We were in Sfas. I was coming back with my son. We're driving in the car, and we're on Highway 6, which is the easiest road in Israel, and it showed we should be getting home very, very quickly, and sure enough, there was a slowdown. It turned out there was a chain accident. Ahead of us, we got delayed for an hour. Okay, that's it. Listen, we did what we had to do. We behaved responsibly. We put on the ways, which is responsible behavior. So why did it happen? I don't know, but obviously, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's the first lesson here. There's no rhyme and reason. There's no pattern over it. There's no reason. You can't figure it out. HaKadosh Baruch Hu had a reason for them to go in all these places. At a deeper level, every place where they camped in the desert, they were meant to purify it of various deep spiritual forces, whatever that means. Okay, I don't know about deep spiritual forces, and I don't know exactly what they look like. But at the end of the day, moving around in life, HaKadosh Baruch Hu moves us around, and we have to have the faith that he knows what he's doing. That's lesson number one. Lesson number two, which I think is extremely, extremely important for us, is also you're always prepared to move. You're always getting ready. You never know. You go to sleep at night. Hey guys, have a good night's sleep, but just realize in the morning we may be on the move. That means that in our day-to-day life, we always have to be in a state of readiness to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Never take ourselves out of being, right now I can't serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Sometimes one of the problems people travel. People travel. You're allowed to travel. There's no halakhic problem with traveling. The problem is that sometimes if you travel to various places, what are you going to do about a minyan? Oh, well, we don't need a minyan because I need to see some waterfall somewhere. Well, what's more important? There are other waterfalls. You can see pictures, see films. You're willing to give up. You're willing so easily to just take yourself out of being able to serve a control. Okay, a person needs to go. You need to go. But sometimes a person puts himself in a situation where I can barely find a shul. I have nowhere to. You're completely. You're out of your. A person has to be prepared. He has to be ready at any time. At any time, there's a potential for avodah Hashem. Yeah.
Well, I was just thinking another potential reason could be that, this is especially true for Baal Teshuvas, but you're working on something, and you achieve it, and you feel, okay, good, I've achieved this. You never know when the next time you're gonna I learned that now. Now that I got my tefillin wrapping down, I just also now learned that there's a new thing that I need to do. I need an extra kavanah in my davening. And now you're working on that next.
Good,
You're
excellent,
chasing
excellent,
after
excellent, excellent, excellent. The commentators actually say that's why it says, you'll notice it says, Al pi Hashem yachanu v'al pi Hashem yiso. By the word of Hashem they camp, and by the word of Hashem they travel. And it's one of the Parsha says that. A person, it's not just Baalei Teshuvas, it's all of us, because we all have to grow and progress. But sometimes a person has to know, right now is the time to solidify this level. Al pi Hashem yachanu. Stay right where you are right now. Don't move too fast. Stay right where you are. Solidify what you've got right now. And then, Al pi Hashem yiso. By the word of Hashem you travel, try to move to the next level. Don't jump too fast. Sometimes in Yiddishkeit, staying right where you are is also part of what is Hashem. We all have that urge to grow, and we want to become the Chafetz Chaim eventually. At least within the next 2 weeks. And sometimes we're pedaling a little too fast. Our temperature is too high. Calm down a little bit. Cool off. Just work on what you got right now. Solidify it. I want to take on more of this and more of that. Sometimes Baalei Teshuvas, many guys have asked me, guys who they're frustrated in shul because the davening moves too fast and they can't keep up with it. Say you can't keep up with it. So daven a few less things. Say a couple of things. Get that solid, get that down, work on the next stage. Some guys I want to learn this, but when am I going to learn Nachan? When am I going to learn the Rambam? And when am I going to learn Halacha? And when am I going to learn Mishnayos? And when am I going to Chumash? When am I going to listen? I said, you just can't do everything at once. It doesn't work that way. You're working on one thing right now. Work on that, and then you get to the next stage. You work on that, and then you get to the next stage. Al pi Hashem yachanu. It's Hashem that wants you to camp. It's Hashem that wants you to maintain a solid position. Solidify it. Be balanced with it. Al pi Hashem yiso. And then you'll serve Hashem by traveling, by moving to the next level. Very good, Ezra. Very good. All right, TBC.